All right. Hello, everybody. Good to see some people already joining us. Hi, Charity. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Lindsay. Hey, Charity. Hi, everyone.
Long time no see. Just in case anyone's wondering, Charity has won the challenge of best background for for remote panel discussions. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. My name's Lindsay. We're joined today by Charity and Andrew. We are all members of the Trees for the Future team. We're joining you from across the world right now, actually. And as you start coming in, please tell us where you're joining us from. We'll introduce ourselves. Hi, Maimuna. Hi, Rosa. So today we're here to talk about desertification. Today, as many of you know, is the World Day to combat desertification and drought. And at Trees for the Future, a lot of our work applies to that. So I'm going to let Charity and Andrew introduce themselves, and then we'll get started. Charity, why don't you go first?
Hi, everyone. I'm Charity Naloga, and I work with Trees as a communications and business development liaison. My work allows me to interact with farmers so often, about more than 5 times a year. So I love my job for that. It gets me in the field, walking around, talking to people, the people whose lives we're impacting. I think I take pride in my work. I love talking about what we do. The business development part of it is recruiting partners or donors. Yeah, you can call them donors. So trying to recruit corporate donors, people who can give us money or tools or whatever support that they can give us for our project. Yes, that's what I do. Hi, and I'm glad to be here.
And we're excited to have you, Charity. Yes, as some of you may have seen in our first invite, we had initially planned on having Sierra from our Senegal team. She had some technical difficulties, so she's going to join us in July on a panel. And Charity, we're so glad to have you. As she said, she works with farmers regularly and collects their stories. So she's the perfect person to have on today to help us understand what desertification means for people who are experiencing it in real time and what Trees for the Future is doing to help solve the problem. Andrew, this is your second time with us on a Trees panel. Go ahead and introduce yourself for all those who may not have met you last time.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Zacharias. I'm the Director of Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning here at Trees for the Future. It's my job to collect data, analyze it, and assess impact at individual, local, regional, country level, and globally at our organization, allowing our organization then to make data-driven decision-making. So I'm really excited to come here today and speak with you all about the effects of desertification on households in our program and what we can do to combat it.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's the perfect start. For those of you just joining us, as Andrew said, we're discussing combating desertification and drought on this World Day to combat desertification and drought. We're joined by Charity from Uganda, Andrew, who's joining us from Ireland. I'm Lindsay, joining from just outside of DC. And I, for those of you just joining, am on the marketing team and work with liaisons like Charity across sub-Saharan Africa, telling farmer stories and engaging with all of you fine people. Hi, Sylvia. Hi, Alec. We've got a couple of team members on here. Hey, Warren. So good to see you. Warren's a member of the Forest Garden Training Center. He's a certified user, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, Warren. So let's go ahead and get started. Today, when we talk about desertification, it's really important to understand what desertification is, right? And that's when the land is degraded and desertified, specifically in dry land areas, because of land use and climate change. We know that it is caused by land use and climate change. And today we're going to dig into how we can improve our land use practices to mitigate desertification and reverse desertification. About 33% of the world's soil is gone. We see 3.2 billion people negatively affected by land degradation at this point in time. 70% of the Earth's dry lands are now degraded. And when we talk about desertification, we're really talking about these dry lands, but also we're talking about, we often talk about dry lands, but it's important to remember that desertification is happening in more and more places on the planet because of climate change and because of these degrading land use practices. So, without further ado, Charity, I would like to hear from you first and help us understand, Charity is in Uganda, works with farmers in Uganda. Uganda is a more temperate part of the world that we might not think of as overly dry and a place that struggles with desertification. Charity, tell us about the landscape and the climate of this beautiful country and where you do and do not see desertification as a problem.
Okay, so on a large scale, Uganda, of course, we are part of the tropics, the tropical countries in East Africa, and we are a bit south of where most people would think desertification happens in the Sahara and whatnot. But like Lindsay shared, it's not just the deserts; it's also the way people are treating land and how we are having all these farming practices that harm our land. In Uganda, most of that, maybe 60%, you can say 60% is green, because you'll find green trees, crops, even in our capital city. So it's mostly a green country, but we also have those areas that are dry, where farmers or people are struggling with their pieces of land and productivity of these pieces of land. And those are the places that are experiencing a lot of desertification from all these bad farming practices that they've been doing over time. And some of these places are in the north, especially in the north, I'd say heavily in the north. And we have about 2 projects that graduated last year from this area. So we've taken the time to understand and know that these places are faced with this challenge. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we see, so, in parts of Uganda, it's worse. In other parts, there's not this challenge as much. Andrew, where else in the countries where we work, and just in the world for our viewers who might not know, are struggling with desertification, as Charity mentioned, at some of these disproportionate rates?
Right. So looking at equatorial sub-Saharan Africa is where we see a lot of impact of desertification happening in the world. The vast majority of our projects in Tanzania are located in areas that are extremely dry and desert is expanding quickly. The regions of Singida and Tabora are both challenged with soil degradation and depleting resources for agricultural products or activities. Similarly, in West Africa, in central Senegal, the region of Kaffrine is very much threatened by the encroaching desert every single year. and struggle with all of the challenges that come with that.
Mm-hmm. And Senegal and those portions of West Africa, all across the Sahel, is where we often hear talk about desertification, the Great Green Wall, which Trees for the Future is a part of. So I think the important thing, if our viewers walk away from anything from this section of the chat, is that desertification is affecting people all over the world at different varying degrees. And what we see at Trees for the Future in the way that we work is addressing that. So before we get to the forest garden approach, I want to quickly, discuss, well, not too quickly, discuss what is causing it. And Charity, we were talking earlier today about, people often know that climate change and unsustainable land use are a cause, but tell us what it looks like. What do people, excuse me, not what it looks like. Tell us what leads to that on the land use scale. What are farmers doing on their land that is causing this problem at this scale?
There are quite a number of causes for desertification in this country currently, but I'd say one of the big ones is farmers having to grow one type of crop, which is monocropping on their pieces of land, which we know is in the long run, it's not good for the soil, because if you keep growing maize every other year, year in, year out, with time you're not going to get the same yields, you're not going to have the same productivity out of your land. So we have this problem as one of the biggest, because most of the manufacturers here, for example, for cooking oil, tea, different things, different manufacturers are buying from farmers, individual farmers. They can select an area and decide maybe to buy tea from there. So when farmers see other people, when they see these manufacturers coming in and sourcing these raw materials from them, they decide to clear their land and start planting whatever crop it is that's required. So for example, in the north, we have a lot of people planting sunflower on their pieces of land. We have a lot of people planting soya, which is soy. We have a lot of people planting maize as well. So you're finding a lot of monocropping in these pieces of in these areas. The other thing would be fuel wood. So in Uganda, we use a lot of charcoal, which is gotten from trees. So it's this is pushing farmers to cut down their trees, or if they're not using it for their own home consumption for the fuel wood, well, just those who use firewood, they are using it for, they are burning charcoal to sell, to make money. And cutting deforestation is really bad for land and the climate in general, the environment. So it's I think these are the biggest causes right now that are degrading our soil, and in turn making farmers' land very unproductive in the long run.
It's that feeling that a farmer needs to intensify what they're growing to be able to sell, to turn a profit, to be able to feed their family, right? And Charity, as you mentioned, it also feeds into climate change. So Andrew, going over to you, and in relation to climate change, how does climate change, and we know it's this vicious cycle, but how does climate change contribute to desertification?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of ways in which climate change can affect desertification in an area. First off, rising temperatures on average around the world are increasing the amount of exposure soil has to extreme weather events such as sun, low drought. Changes in weather as well reduces the amount of rainfall that allows for perennial plant life to grow on land and establish soils, keep it in one place, keep it from being blown away, and leaving this tired, degraded soils, which then become the actual desert, the expanding deserts.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just the landscape changing, right? It's entire livelihoods changing. Charity, when we look at desertification in northern Uganda in particular, what's the impact on the people that you work with? How does that affect people?
So unproductivity of land, of course, is going to the fastest, and I feel like the biggest problem would be hunger, because people cannot access food. They are not accessing the right diet for their health. Because if you're growing maize only on your piece of land, it's going to mean that when you want to eat another type of food, you're going to have to buy that type of food from the market. For example, vegetables or whatever it is that you have to buy food. And we know that most of these smallholder farmers do not have that kind of money, or to go out to the market and buy potatoes or rice or whichever it is that they want to include in their diet. They don't have this, and it's not a sustainable way of living. So they they'll be people will go hungry because they cannot access these resources, because the land is taken up by just this maize or this sunflower, whatever it is. And then of course poverty. With time, some of not actually when these manufacturers realize that they can source these raw materials cheaper, or whatever reason it is, they are giving farmers peanuts. They're giving them very little money for this. So it's people are getting deeper and deeper into poverty. They're not they're not making use of their land the right way, because they're just growing this crop. And if you don't have good yields, which will happen over time if you're planting the same thing, if you don't have good yields, he's going to skip you and buy from somebody who has better yields, who's probably using some artificial additions, whatever it is. And at the end of the day, you're not selling what you're planting. So hunger and poverty, to me, would be the biggest. I worked on a story a few months ago about one of our farmers called Francis, and he's also from our Lira project in the north. And Francis, I think, best portrays what was going on before, because he was planting mainly maize on his piece of land, not mainly, entirely maize. So just before he joined the project, and this was after I think about 2 years of planting maize, he wasn't earning the same. I think he wasn't able to sell his maize in the market or to the manufacturer that was sourcing for it, and he was struggling. He did not have money to buy food for his family. He did not have money for school fees. He was really going through it, but just before he joined the project. So it just gives you a picture of what these farmers are going through. They are struggling. Most of them have given up, if not for some of these projects like trees. They've given up because they don't know what next. They don't have the knowledge.
Yeah. And Kendall dropped, Kendall's behind the scenes, and she dropped Francis's story in the comments. So we'll talk more about Francis as we go on through the conversation. Charity spent a lot of time with him and his family, and shared a really powerful story. So we will keep sharing today about him in the panel, and then please do go and read his story when you have time afterward as well. Andrew, how do you see, so, we have examples of what we see for farmers like Francis. What are you seeing in other countries where trees works? And, what is, I guess my question is that applicable to everyone? Is that what other people are going through? And for those who don't live off of the land, what's the implication for desertification? Why should those of us living in a city who don't farm care?
Yeah, absolutely. The story that Charity shared with us is quite common. We see it a lot over all of our country programs where we're working, and beyond. One of my friends named Ali Mbai, in one of our projects in Kaffrine, Senegal, I met him in 2018 when we were visiting and opening up a new project in his village. Ali told me how he was working 10 acres by hand to grow peanuts. This is a once a year, one harvest a year activity, and he found that he was just barely making enough to survive, and recognized that there was a need for a change. Changes in climate has made those activities unstable, unpredictable, and he was really excited to work with our organization about a new way of farming and a new way of living. If he was unable to make enough that year, he was considering moving to the capital city of Dakar to find work, or possibly even abroad. These aren't this isn't a new story. This is not a unique story. People do move to capitals. People move out of countries to find more prosperous opportunities for themselves and their families. We see stories like this from around the world, increasing migration and conflict, looking at the case of the Syrian civil war, which was caused in part to global climate change.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that we should all care about, if not for just your basic humanitarian purposes, for practical reasons such as mass migration.
Absolutely, yeah. And as we talk about farmers like Ali, like Francis, and as Andrew said, they're not alone. We see a lot of this large-scale desertification happening around the planet, and it isn't recent in the way of the last couple years, but it is relatively recent when we talk about humanity. And in the last 150 or so years is when desertification really started ticking up, and that's very clearly tied, as Charity and Andrew have shared, with land use and our farming practices. But, and why we're here today to talk about Trees for the Future, is there are more sustainable ways to farm that do not degrade the land, but actually support it, support the people, support the farmers, support the biodiversity, support the climate. So that is what we want to talk with you about, Andrew. Can you tell everybody joining today what the forest garden approach is and how it works?
Absolutely. So we've been planting trees since 1989, and over those 30 years, we have cultivated a highly managed approach to agriculture, where farmers work with the land, invest their time and their resources into the land by combining agroforestry or tree planting with an agricultural edge to it, with market gardening techniques to produce high value, easily marketable, highly nutritious and easily accessible food products that could be eaten at home or taken to market and sold for profit. This approach is taught by the organization over a 4-year period to our participants. And we've seen just staggering increases in food security and profit at the household level.
And that's very helpful. And I saw we had the picture up of the forest garden for a moment there. It really is an incredible transformation that takes place. And Charity, as you meet farmers through different periods of the program, sometimes, when Charity and I are talking about what story we want to go get, is it a new farmer? Is it a graduated farmer? Is it someone in year 1, year 2, year 3? Charity, tell us how farmers acclimate. How do they receive the forest garden approach and the training that they're receiving from staff? How do they react or respond when they first are learning how to implement what Andrew described?
Okay, so what's common among farmers in terms of how they view or respond to this very new information is most of them are not aware of these techniques. Of course, the forest garden approach has a lot of farming practices in there that are taught over this period, like Andrew shared, and most of them are new to the farmers. For example, I'll say most of the farmers will tell you, I did not know that I can get rid of pests and diseases using what's in my garden. I did not know that I can use what's in my garden to to make compost. I didn't know that I had to leave behind all this chemical stuff and use what I have in front of me without spending money to control everything that's affecting my yield. So it's new. It's very new information. Farmers will tell you when I have sit down to them, they'll mention how they refer to the technicians as teachers. So teacher so and so was telling us this the other week or the other month, and I was so shocked. And it's so new to me that I can do this with my own piece of land, and I didn't know that I could utilize this space to get this much. So the information, what's common is that the information is new. They are happy about it because, of course, they don't have to have so much input where somebody comes in and tells you, okay, you have to buy this ABCD to make this work. you can actually use your piece of land you can make it work for you as long as you put in the work and you have the right knowledge. So I'd say it's definitely a positive response. They're open to it. That's for sure. And the fact that you can see results within year one, because you can interview a farmer maybe at the beginning of a project, maybe 3 or 4 months in, and when you visit this farmer 6 months later, at the end of the first year, this farmer is able to tell you, you know what, I've been living off my garden since month number 2 or month number 3 when I joined the project, which means it makes sense even before they get far into the project. So it's really received in a very good way, which I'm happy about.
Yes, absolutely. And it is all about education and training, right? And that's what Trees for the Future's, program is really based in, is farmer education. And as Charity pointed out, it is all so new, even to farmers like Francis, who have been farming their entire lives for decades, when they don't have, when the sustainable approach to farming isn't the norm, we lose sight of these approaches and these techniques that, Charity, like you mentioned, are less expensive and better for the land and better for the farmer. Charity, describe, we had that picture of the aerial forest garden up a moment ago. Describe what transformations take place when you visit a farmer, at the very beginning, at what we call mobilization, when their land is still desertified, and then a year or two later when it starts to change.
Okay, so luckily, the farmer that we're talking about, that I've mentioned, Francis, in the North Nalira project, has been with us for 4 years, since 2016 to 2020. So his project graduated last year. That's 4 years. I managed to visit him at the end of last year, around November. That's when we had a sit down. I'd seen him earlier, somewhere in 2019, but I saw him. I had the most recent visit was in 2020 in November. And you could see that difference, because when Francis was telling me, I had maize on my piece of land. When you're walking around his garden, and you can ably see that there's a difference, because he now has beans, he has some eggplants, he's growing ginger as well in another section of his garden. It's with the agroforestry trees as well that are bordering his garden. There's a very clear and visible transformation on his piece of land. I actually found him in the garden harvesting ginger. You'll see in one of the images, he's seated there with a big basin of ginger. And ginger is it's one of the expensive crops, so he was going to make a little bit of money later on in the day. There's a visible change from the beginning. If you were seeing, some malnourished maize at the beginning of it, now you can see that this person has a different kind of crops, especially vegetables, those that are also good for them in terms of diet, not just his piece of land, but you can see that it's useful to his home. There's a clear change from the beginning to the end of the 4 years. And what's encouraging about this approach is this change does not come at the end of the 4 years. It starts right away. Even by the first year, you can see changes in farmers' gardens. So I've had visits most recently in May with farmers who joined us just last year, around March 2020. So I went to see them a year later, which is around April, May of this year, 2021. And you can see there's a change from what they were doing, from their pieces of land from before to now. They can tell you, okay, so far I've had 4 harvests in just 1 year. I have gone to the market 4 times and I've sold my vegetables and I'm making money. You can see their green walls are looking up. The agroforestry trees are, a lot of them, this is so common among us farmers. They'll tell you the forest garden, the living fence is acting as a barrier it's acting as a barrier for my land. I can fence my land away from my neighbors so we don't have quarrels. So trees is in a way helping us not fight with our neighbors, because I've demarcated my piece of land using these trees. Yeah, so And it's good to see farmers happy about this, not just 6 months, a year into this, they can say, okay, so I think this makes sense. And it gives them, the zeal to keep working towards, finishing the 4-year project.
Absolutely. Yeah. We talk about this not being a silver bullet solution. The forest garden approach takes time. We need to take the time to educate people and educate all the different stakeholders when it comes to agriculture and sustainable farming. But that's not to say that transformations don't start happening pretty quickly when we start treating the land the way that we should be treating it. And so, Andrew, and as much as we like to hear farmer stories, as Andrew said at the beginning of this meeting, we do back it up with data. Andrew has been working on a years-long drone monitoring program in Senegal. Actually, was the first one, right, Andrew? But then you've also gotten imagery elsewhere, and he's basically taking photos of the land at each stage before the forest garden starts, and then at intervals throughout to monitor and evaluate how many trees and even things like how many leaves are on a piece of land. So Andrew, can you explain the drone monitoring program for us and why it's so important?
Yes, absolutely. So improvements in accessibility in the consumer and hobby grade drone technology scene over the past couple decades even has really enabled organizations such as Trees for the Future to utilize this technology to get a bird's eye view of our impact. So not only can we get such amazing comparison pictures like the one shown just moments ago, but we can use drones like this little guy behind me on the table to make some empirical, quantifiable, measurable data or assessments on the impact that we're having. Desertification will not be reversed without a change in perennial plant life growing in the soil, on the land from year to year. And our drone program allows us to monitor the development of these forest garden sites to measure just that. So we will go out to our forest garden locations before a project begins at the peak of the dry season, where one would expect typically to not find a lot of plant life, to not see a lot of leaf area index, canopy cover, or above ground biomass. And above ground biomass is just a fancy way of saying plant life. And we fly these drones and we take hundreds, thousands of pictures over the course of these trips. And we, similar to that one right there. And we get back to the office and stitch them all together into these two-dimensional maps, high-resolution maps, and also 3D models, and make these calculations. Next year, we'll go out and do it again. And we see what has changed. And we're able to see these amazing comparison photos. But also, we're able to calculate just how much more leaf cover, canopy cover is there? How much more, like what percentage increase in biomass is there? And we've had just some really fantastic results, increases by hundreds to the thousands of percentage points just over a 1-year period. It's also complemented by just ongoing communication with the participants, like Ali, like you spoke of earlier in this presentation. I met him in 2018. I was able to get back out there in 2019 to continue the drone program. He was one of the participants chosen for this. And he was just doing so much better during that second trip. We were able to talk about the impact of the forest garden approach and the training program on his life. He was able to decrease the amount of land he was investing in peanuts by about half. He was down to 5 acres at that point and had actually doubled the size of the forest garden that he had made with the program. So we were able to actually capture that with our drone equipment. Unfortunately, this was, of course, pre-COVID times, and I'm really looking forward to getting back out there very soon to check in with Ali and see how he's doing.
Yeah, we'll have a little blip in time of where we didn't have the imagery. But side note, because of the forest garden, because of what it offers and provides to farming families, forest garden farmers were that much more resilient through COVID and through quarantine and through the last year. And so we're getting reports that farmers were able to continue feeding their families. They were continuing to, put more trees in nurseries and plant more trees. So that just is further proof of the success of the program. But for the drone program specifically, Andrew, touch a little bit more on the other items that you're seeing. You often talk about humidity and moisture. And so Andrew talks about when leaf area index and above ground biomass go up, moisture goes up. What does that look like in the drone report? And then what does that look like for farmers like Ali and Francis?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we see increases in leaf area index and above ground biomass, what does that mean? It makes a lot of sense to somebody who's like, has like an engineering mind or thinks very quantifiably about things. But what does that mean on the ground? It means that we're seeing a return of perennial plant life to this area. This is establishment of living fences around the perimeter, like Charity was saying. This allows the farmer to protect their land, but from people and from cattle and from animals. But it also protects it from the sun. It protects it from the wind. It allows the soil to remain there, and in its shade, it is able to capture and hold more rainwater, more precipitation from the long cool nights, and this in turn creates a bit of a micro ecosystem where.
Yeah.
Where humidity is higher and more, and it creates conditions that are more favorable to plant life, which is great if you are doing market gardening.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we have drone aerial data that we're seeing is physically reversing desertification within years. And then we see farmers like Francis in Uganda who have all of these trees that they're planting on their farm, all of these different crops that they're planting. And the same thing is true for them in their day-to-day life. Charity, can you tell us, just as the farmer's land comes back to life, what benefits do they start to experience?
So I think, thank you, Lindsay. So I think one of the biggest and the quickest wins would be on diet. That one of the biggest, because this touches on health. These farmers are able to, like I mentioned, we work with smallholder farmers. So people who are not making so much money, they're using their pieces of land to survive, food, and maybe getting some small income to better their homes. So diet is the biggest, for me, it's the biggest win because they're able to feed their homes better. Like I mentioned in the beginning, if somebody is planting just maize on their piece of land or whatever it is, sunflower, they're able to increase. They're not feeding their children sunflower like that, so they have to go out and buy this food. So if now they have added some of the few vegetables that we give farmers, at least here in Uganda, as part of our project. We have eggplants, tomatoes, onions. We have a lot of fruit trees. We have papaya, oranges, tangerine, lemon. So you'll find a diversity of food. And these farmers can go to the garden, pick, and go home and cook. You'll find, of course, some of them are picked interest in other, maybe some herbs like sweet potatoes and that go with these vegetables, which makes a lot of sense. They are eating better. They're feeding much, much better because, they are growing all this on their piece of land. The other win for me is income. So some of these farmers will tell you, when you sit down and speak to them, they'll tell you, for example, Francis, he wasn't going to the market so much before, prior to when the manufacturers or the people who were buying his maize stopped. He wasn't getting so much. Because now it was just redundant. He was just looking at it. It was growing and he'd try to sell at the market, but quality matters. And so when he joined the project, he was able to take more things to the market. Some farmers will even tell you, I've not been to the market before. I said going after I joined Trees. I was just growing food for home consumption. I'm growing some cassava and some beans, and that's it. But if now I have all these things, I have extra oranges, I've fed my home, I have extra oranges, tangerines, whatever it is that I have, I can take to the market and sell more. We actually don't go to the field during market days because it's it's
not
wrong.
there.
So, yeah, that's their money making thing. But yes, like I was saying, it's more income, and this income, of course, is going to translate to so many things needed for a lot of things. If they make this extra money, they are able to buy a few things, to look at their homes better. The other win would be knowledge, transfer of knowledge. So in my, as part of my work, and why I love it so much, is I'm able to meet families as is. There are times when I go to the field and you find a father, a mother, and 3 of their children in the garden. You know, you'll find a 10-year-old carrying around some water or some tubers, and he's trying, yeah, he's getting some work done. He's so little, but they've given him a very small task. So these kids, imagine from a young age, are learning how to, grow or practice these. They take them directly from the technician, from technician to parent, from parent to child. So this child is going to grow up knowing this is the right way to farm, because I've known this since I was 5, or whatever age they start understanding. They know from this point to this is how I should farm. They don't know anything else. So imagine what is going to do for us in the future, as this next generation. And when they grow up, they're going to teach their children. So it's going to be the forest garden approach all through generations, which makes so much sense. And aside from knowledge, the other thing that stands out for me when I'm in the field is the fact that a lot of farmers talk about education, taking their children to school. So I've noticed that most of them, when you speak to them, the life free trees, they tell you, some of my children are not studying, or I'm prioritizing the older ones, taking maybe 2 and leaving the other 4, things like that. So kids are not going to school because, of course, there's no income. Either not all of them are going, or just a few, 1 or 2 are going. So if you're making more income, like we had mentioned earlier, you're in position to keep your kids in school and also take them to school. Yeah, you go to a farmer's home and they'll tell you, no, my kids are not here, they're in school. And you're happy because they can afford to keep their kids in school. It's so common for people for farmers here, smallholder farmers, it's normal for kids to just sit home and not study. But giving farmers the ability to actually send their children to school for a better future. There's a farmer I met in May when I was in one of our projects in Mount Elgon, and she told me she was so happy. She told me that she graduated 2 weeks ago from university. Imagine. And she has been a farmer all her life, and this is a farm, so much money from composting. A lot of the village people have not taken time to study, to learn what composting is. So she makes big piles of composting and sells them to her neighbors because they don't have the energy to do this. So she's making money from it, and she was so happy. She told me, I was able to pay for my child's final semester, final year. And it's good to see farmers get from this point to a completely different life. And of course, when your children are educated, it's a whole other ballgame. So yeah, I think it's working. Farmers are happy, and I think that's all that matters. We're here to change lives, plant trees and change lives.
Yes, ma'am. That's so indicative of the success of the Forest Garden approach, Charity. Thank you for sharing all of those. I mean, as Charity said, it's ending hunger, it's ending poverty, breaking the cycle of hunger and poverty by giving families the opportunity to farm in a more sustainable way, generation after generation, or giving kids the opportunity to go and get an education and do something that they're passionate about and that they can succeed in. All of that without even scratching the surface on all of the environmental impacts, right? And so when we talk about World Day to combat desertification and drought, we're clearly thinking about our planet, our climate, and as the Forest Garden approach addresses, the climate and biodiversity and improving our environment, it's also digging into all of these other impacts that Charity and Andrew have been sharing with us. So thank you both for being here with us today and for sharing all of this. I know we have a few questions, so we're going to stay on for a few more minutes, get to some of those questions that you all shared in the comments. And I think we're going to try to pull it up here. Here we go. So Warren asks, planting trees in arid climates and depleted soils seems pointless without substantial compost and initial nurturing, irrigation, protection from wildlife, etc. How will 1 billion trees survive? Warren's been following our emails and posts. I hadn't quite gotten to that, but we will plant 1 billion 1 billion trees by 2030 as Trees for the Future through farmers and partners. So Warren wants to know how can 1 billion trees stick around in an arid climate or a semi-arid climate? How about we go to Andrew, because I think I'm going to give another one to Charity.
Thanks, Lindsay, and thanks, Warren, for that really great question. This is a question that we get a lot. So protection is the first step that we do at training program in the forest garden approach. Our participants create a dead fence or non-living fence around the perimeter of their 1 acre forest garden, give or take. And this serves to protect the land that they are going to be turning into a forest garden, including the trees. So once that is established, they're able then to start planting trees inside. These trees flourish. They do really, really well in depleted soils and in areas that are prone to droughts. Species, agroforestry tree species such as Lucina leucocephala, Calliandra, neem in some cases, loads of acacia species, benefit the soil by reintroducing nitrogen and compostable leaf fodder back into the land, but then also work to establish a living fence, which will replace the dead fence after a few years. These thorny acacia species will keep out the chickens and goats as they kind of pass around the area. And the larger species of trees were able to weave their branches together to kind of keep out the larger animals and humans as well. But it's a really great system which restores the soil and restores the land, but also has a practical purpose for the farmer as it helps their production systems.
Mm-hmm. And each forest garden, as Andrew says, is about 1 acre. And by the end of the 4-year program, those forest gardens are going to have 2,500 trees easy to as many as 4,000 trees. And so, with each forest garden comes thousands more trees. And as Andrew was saying, that's the farmer protecting the land and the trees. The farmer has a vested interest in those trees, and the trees are helping the farmer. So it's a reciprocal relationship that will really enable Trees for the Future to reach 1 billion trees by 2030. And those trees aren't just planted for the environment or carbon sequestration or anything one particular environmental purpose. It's all of those environmental purposes and then all of the human elements that we've been talking about today. I think we have time for at least one more question, maybe two. Let's see what we have. Okay, Ovi, I think Ovi says, what are the biggest challenges? Do you have issues with local education, seed availability, expertise, cost of planting, tree survival rate? Charity, would you hit on the local education bit? And then I think, Andrew, if you want to touch on tree survival rate, or either or.
Okay, so in terms of local education, like I had mentioned, it's getting the kids to school is one thing. Getting the kids is one thing, but keeping them there is another thing. In terms of, I wanted to say something small about seed availability. I don't know if, I think Andrew had mentioned, or just to add on that, is we come in and provide. We actually provide some seeds to these farmers. Majority of, especially the agroforestry trees, the fruit trees, some vegetables. So it's a start. You'll find that some of these agroforestry trees, as they grow, they provide seeds that farmers can even sell it can give out or sell to other farmers. I'll give an example of an interview I had earlier this year with a farmer who harvested. He has a very, very big family. He's called Joseph, and we gave him seeds for amaranthus, and he harvested about 60 kilograms of this from just what we gave him. So imagine that, and he has about 11 children. So imagine imagine how big his family is. He was able to retain some of these for home consumption. He mixed them with maize and soy to make porridge for his kids, and then he distributed and sold the others to farmers who are not part of the project. So just some of these crops or trees will give you seeds as well. So it's we are I don't know if we had made that clear, but we also provide seeds. We are, in terms of expertise, we have, like Lindsay had mentioned, we have technicians on site for 4 years working with these farmers to establish these forest gardens to ensure that they are practicing the right farming methods, and they are also these technicians are well trained, and they go through a very a proper process to also learn, and there are people with agricultural background, so they're able to stay on site and help or work with these farmers one-on-one to to ensure that we come in, we live, and you are a completely different person.
And to your point about coming in, I think is, Andrew, if you would want to touch on mobilization, when we talk about nonprofits and NGOs supporting sustainable efforts, I think what makes Trees for the Future so sustainable and such a fantastic organization is that local outreach happens from the very beginning. And so to educate and inform people of the program in the area, I think it's really key in our long-term success. And I think that was another part of Ovi's question. Andrew, can you touch on that, on just how we reach out to folks and how they come to be part of our program?
Yeah, absolutely. So the mobilization process takes place over the course of many different steps. We do have sensitization campaigns where regional leaders will meet with local leaders. People from our organization meet with local leaders from villages and regional government agencies to discuss the program, talk about the contents, talk about the activities, and conduct some sensitization about what our intentions would be if there was enough interest. People are then organized by interest into groups at different village levels, and the very first couple of projects or a couple of training programs revolve around forest garden design and mapping of your own personal forest garden. So kind of taking the participant through the steps of what a forest garden is and what the implications are for them. Kind of imagining what their dream forest garden look like, putting it down on the paper, and then follow it up by technicians visiting them in their home at their potential forest garden, and assessing their dream and talking about, okay, well, how can we make this dream a reality?
Fantastic. Well, I want to end on dream. I'm so grateful for both of you joining us today, and for all of our viewers today. What we're talking about with combating desertification and in the process improving the planet and thousands and thousands of farmers and farmer family lives, that's all possible because of donor support. Brand partners, organizations, and individual donors are key in our success and in the success of forest garden farmers. So we really encourage you, in honor of World Day to Combat Desertification and Drought, to make a donation to Trees for the Future, be part of the solution. You can also learn about becoming a monthly donor and join our Sustainer Circle. That way you can make a small gift every month and make sure to have a continual impact month over month. And whatever you can give is a help. 25 cents plants a tree and so much more. It offers the training, the seeds, the resources, the tools. All of those things come from your gift. So we really appreciate your support, and we so look forward to having you, both Andrew and Charity, back, and all of our viewers back next time. Well, I lied. Andrew and Charity aren't going to be on the next panel, but we'll have them back again sometime soon. Make sure to tune in, everybody, on Monday at noon Eastern for our panel on migration in honor of World Refugee Day, and we'll share that information via social media posts, email, and on our website. So thank you both so much for joining us. I really enjoyed chatting with you. This was really fun.
Well, thank you, Lindsay, and thank you, Charity, and thanks everyone out there.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.